Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the one tactical area Arsenal can exploit against Steve Davis's Wolves. So in today's video, first we're going to focus on Wolves' shape, then we'll shift to their right side issues, and lastly we'll focus on how Arsenal can structurally set up to harm this Wolves backline. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, we're expecting Wolves to play in a 4-2-3-1, but under Davis's interim spell, we've seen them swap between a 4-2-3-1 and a 4-3-3. The 4-2-3-1 has often seen Matheus Nunes play just in behind Diego Costa, and from there they alternate their wide options and their midfield options. You could go with Ruben Neves or João Moutinho in that midfield zone, but as of late we've seen Traore and Ruben Neves play in that midfield zone, and then they've swapped the wide players. If they want a direct touchline threat, they could look to Adama Traore, or if they're looking for inverted wide attackers, they could go for Gonçalo and Podence. And the other alternative that we've witnessed from Davis is to remove the number 10, go 4-3-3 with the two wide players flanking Diego Costa, and then slotting João Moutinho into that midfield zone with Traore and Ruben Neves. When Wolves play in a 4-2-3-1, they often drop off into two banks of four out of possession, so that'd leave the front two sitting in between Thomas Partey, and that would allow the deeper midfielders to deal with xhaka and Odegaard, while the wider players would close down the fullbacks. If they played in a 4-3-3, you'd expect them to drop off into more of a 4-5-1, and from there it could get a bit tricky because now you have 3v3 in that midfield zone, but you need someone to push forward to sit on Thomas Partey. They could simply have their center forward sitting on Thomas Partey and then pushing forward to close down the Arsenal center back. But from here, what you may see is that the deepest lying midfielder will push forward to close down Thomas Partey, and then you would expect the shuttlers to close down xhaka and Odegaard. From a stylistic and structural viewpoint, Wolves in a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 should cope with Arsenal's 4-3-3. So when we focus on the biggest issue that they've encountered under Davis, what you end up seeing is that out in those wider areas, because they're playing with wide forwards, they often get caught higher up the pitch and there's often no protection for the right back. Both Johnny and Nelson Semedo have struggled down that right hand side, and when you break down some of the key moments that have led to Wolves dropping points, it stemmed through the opposition exploiting that flank. If they're playing in a 4-2-3-1 and the right attacking midfielder is caught higher up the pitch, that does put onus on one of the midfielders to shift across to provide cover, but the issue is that they often don't get there in time, and then what you end up seeing is that the right back either loses the 1v1.
Against Nottingham Forest, you witnessed Ruben Neves applying pressure in the midfield zone and focus on the unmarked Gibbs White. Ruben Neves is bypassed and the ball is played out to Gibbs White in a 1v1, and you could see Johnny being pulled towards the ball, but look at the options that should be covering for him. This allows Gibbs White to carry the ball against the Wolves right back, get the ball on towards his right foot to create a shooting angle, but luckily for Wolves, he skies his effort over the net.
They play balls in behind him so that the wide player could break into space beyond the fullback.
Here against Leicester, you witness Soyuncu on the ball, and before pressure is applied, he clips it over Johnny for Barnes, making an outward-inward run in behind the Wolves backline. And as that play develops, Barnes receives the ball towards the edge of the box, and although Johnny is able to apply pressure, Barnes should be playing this ball across the Wolves backline for a simple tap-in, but he ends up playing a tame effort at the keeper.
Or there's simple combination play between the wide player and an attacking midfielder or striker that take the fullback out of the game and allow the opposing side's attacking wide player to exploit that space.
In the build-up to Chelsea's second goal against Wolves, it's Pulisic in a 1v1 against Semedo. He carries the ball into left half space, and you could see that Mount wants the ball, so he drops back. He allows Pulisic to cut across Semedo and drag another marker towards him, and from there Pulisic takes two players out of the game by playing the ball to Mount, and now focus on Pulisic's movement. Semedo ball watches Pulisic running across him, and Mount squeezes a tight reverse pass between Semedo and the center back to place Pulisic in this position in left half space from a tight angle to scoop the ball over the keeper. And then later on, you witness the Wolves press on Koulibaly, but he slides the ball in towards Havertz, dropping off in towards his own half and dragging away a marker, and focus on Kovacic's movement as well. Havertz holds off the press and is able to turn and play the ball across his marker and the ball watching Semedo for Kovacic running off his marker in towards the final third. And from here, he should be playing in Broha free in a 1v1, but he ends up overhitting the pass to halt the attack.
Semedo's consistently struggled down that right hand side, and teams have looked to overload him in those areas because there hasn't been any cover, but they've also looked to play simple balls over the top to get their wide players in advanced positions to deliver crosses for their teammates or simply break free on goal. And even in 1v1 situations, Semedo struggled.
Against Brighton, you witnessed Traore being bypassed and Semedo's right attacking midfielder caught higher up the pitch. From there, you could see Estupiñán in between the lines, and that creates the 2v1 when he receives the ball. From there, Estupiñán drops the ball off to Mitomo, and now Mitomo could run at at Semedo as Estupiñán makes the underlapping run. From there, Semedo's dragged away because of Estupiñán's movement, and Matomo locates the movement of Trossard breaking into left half space. He splits the center back and Semedo, and from this angle, Trossard should be putting Brighton ahead, but he ends up scuffing his effort wide of the net.
But the reason why he is suspended is simply from a long ball over the top where he simply switched off, and that has been another issue that Semedo has encountered, is that he defensively switches off, and teams are able to play runners in behind him, or simply drag his teammates into one area of the pitch, and then use him as a decoy to play balls around him because he switches off, to allow opposing attacking players into dangerous legitimate goal-scoring positions.
In this example, we witnessed Matomo in a 1v1 against Johnny, and while Wolves do look comfortable in that zone, focus on Lallana's movement off Semedo. As Matomo carries the ball towards the penalty area, you can see that Semedo begins to ball watch and he looks to cover the front post, but that creates a 2v1 ahead of the center back as Lallana is now the unmarked man. This is an issue because as Matomo carries the ball towards the edge of the box, he splits two Wolves players, playing the ball into the man that the center back should be marking, and from there Semedo's bypass as he isn't picking up anyone. It creates a 2v1 in that zone, and from there the center back's initial marker can play the ball across him into the path of Lallana, who now gets the ball on towards his right foot and he side foots an effort in towards the top corner.
This is not to say that Wolves can't have their wide players track back and do a good job of negating that threat, and we have witnessed that in several games that they have played during the Davis era, and it's just simple help cover from the attacking wide players for the Wolves right back that does prevent the opposing wide attacking player from breaking in towards a legitimate goal scoring position to create or get shots on goal.
And then once again against Brighton, it's Estupiñán looking to go 1v1 against Semedo, but Podence drops off to make it a 1v2. His pass back option's blocked off, and that forces Estupiñán to attempt to squeeze the ball into Trossard, but he ends up squeezing it into the path of Semedo, who now recovers possession, and from there he scoops the ball over two of the Brighton players in towards Podence, and that allows Wolves to retain possession.
And frankly, that's been the biggest issue that they've encountered throughout his spell, because when you break down how the opposition has created chances against Wolves or scored goals, it often stems down that right hand side, the right back's often isolated, and from there the opposing wingers are getting themselves into positions where they're harming the Wolves backline. Ultimately, this bodes well for an Arsenal side that do look to stretch the pitch with their wide players, and they often look to attack with 5 players, at sometimes 6 if they get one of the fullbacks to push forward on the overlap or underlap. Now, throughout games this season, we've witnessed Arsenal shift into a 2-3-5, which sees the fullbacks tuck into the half spaces to get closer to Thomas Partey to help prevent the counterattack, and that would be helpful here against a Wolves side that does have the pace and creativity to break in transition. There have been times where they've shifted to a 4-1-5 with the narrow fullbacks and then relying on the wide players to provide the width, and more often we've seen them shift to a 3-2-5, which sees the left back tucking towards the central midfield position to drag away the wide player, and that creates the passing lane for Martinelli as you end up seeing Gabriel pushing forward to drag away a marker. It's very likely that Arsenal will look to continue with the 3-2-5 and try to pull the right attacking midfielder away from those wider areas, and then have xhaka and Odegaard pushing forward to occupy space between the center back and the central midfielder. That ensures the central midfielder can't push forward unless Gabriel drags away the right attacking midfielder, and then that would force the Wolves midfielder on that right hand side to push forward. Nevertheless, it creates a large avenue for Martinelli to receive the ball on the touchline, and from there that allows him to run at Johnny, who's expected to start at right back due to Semedo's suspension, and then from there Martinelli has options. He could run towards the byline to take Johnny on 1v1, look to cut central and play in one of his teammates, or with xhaka looking to push forward with his vertical movement, they could create overloads down that side, or simply have Gabriel Jesus shift across to create overloads as well. If Arsenal look to be a bit more adventurous, they could be more of a 3-1-6 with Martinelli tucking in central and occupying one of the center backs with Gabriel Jesus, and then having xhaka dropping off to occupy one of the midfielders. From there, if Gabriel pushes forward to pull away the right attacking midfielder, they could slide the ball out towards the left back, and then from there he could combine with Martinelli, or simply look to take on Johnny 1v1 and attempt to create or get himself into a legitimate goal scoring position. Nevertheless, there shouldn't be any major surprises here, as Wolves have a clear issue down that right hand side, and Arsenal present the flexibility to pull away the right attacking midfielder if they don't want to simply run beyond him, as they don't often track back, and from there they could get Martinelli in 1v1 situations or create situations where he could simply run in behind the right back, as they have struggled to deal with long balls over the top, and this is why Arsenal's left-sided attacking players could play a key role here, as Wolves clearly suffer down that flank. So as you can see, it's clear that Wolves have an issue down their right hand side regardless of the fullback Davis opts to field. thus meaning that Mikel Arteta's left side is likely to play a key role in Arsenal remaining top of the Premier League table heading into the World Cup break.